Hello, welcome to the Sphere Being Alliance YouTube channel. I'm Corey Goode, and today I'm here with Dr. Sala. It's the end of 2020, and we're going to cover the top 10 disclosure news articles that have popped in 2020 and the ramifications on disclosure. Dr. Sala, welcome.
Thanks, Corey. Yeah, it's great to be here, and it
Happy
has
New
been
Year.
a big year.
Happy New Year.
Yeah, Happy New Year to you and to all the viewers. I'm very glad to run over the highlights of 2020 because I think it actually gives us some insight into what's coming in 2021.
Agreed. I think just about everyone watching this video right now is ready for 2020 to be over. If you're ready for 2020 to be over, go down right now and click the like button and write in the comments why you're happy that 2020 is coming to an end. It has been horrendous. I have seen, it's taken its toll on everyone. I've seen your normal, logical people break down into these reactive, just in terrible states. It's really difficult to watch, and it appears that it's only going to get worse as these energies increase. So hopefully 2021, even though more of these energies are going to increase, it might bring, let's put out the intent that it's going to bring justice and truth, to all of us, to humanity. And that actually is, the crux of disclosure. We want the truth and, we want justice.
Well, I remember you saying a few years ago that we were going to enter this end times madness at a certain time. So I don't know if this is it or whether this is just a prelude, because I know you've also talked about 2030 as being a possible date for this micronova too. So, this might be just a prelude to that.
Yeah, in the 1930s range. So if it takes that long for this micronova to occur, then yeah, it's going to get much, much worse. I was told that things are going to get so bad that the example I was told or given was that, you need groceries and, the grocery store is only about a mile away, but you'll be thinking twice about going for that dozen eggs because people are just crazy. And I'm seeing examples of it pop up everywhere. It is bizarre. But if this is just the beginning, I'm a little worried.
Yeah, I remember back in 2010, I was in Mexico City and I met these two people. And I think I mentioned to you before that they said that they were in touch with a Mayan secret space program. And at the time, I hadn't heard of anything like that. But they told me that by 2023, I think it was the year that they mentioned, they said that there would be a global chaos, and they offered me to kind of like train with them to be a pilot to start fighting draconians. So I said, no, I'm here to be a peacemaker, not a war fighter. So I kind of like passed that up. But yeah, they said 2023, and I thought it was crazy at the time, but now it's looking more and more likely.
Yeah, things are moving at a pretty quick pace. All of this may go down a lot quicker than even I had expected. I had hoped to have, time to do a lot more preparation, and, right now, what we're going to talk about today is entertaining. It's encouraging because we're getting a lot of disclosure, but, there are a lot of people out there that are having a really hard time right now, both financially, psychologically, and, this is going to be a nice break from this other reality that, we're hearing about. All of these crazy rumors, even within the Alliance, all of this chatter about crazy stuff. I mean, I went and bought scanner, ham radio, and some other communications devices because I was told that, communications could very likely go out, and if they do, to be calm, to cooperate with, military and marshals, federal marshals and that kind of stuff. It's like real scary stuff. But a lot of this kind of stuff, the rumors are just kind of going around. I don't know how much real information is coming out right now. a lot of recirculated stuff. So, I think all of this is going to play out the way the forefathers set it up, and hopefully, with his, hopefully we can start cutting down on the anxiety of the population, because it is really weird right now dealing with people.
Yeah, well, there's a lot of people waking up in various ways, and I'm sure that as we approach January 6th and January 20, that seem to be critical dates, that there's going to be big shocks. And I think, the good thing about that, even though it's going to result in a lot of turmoil, people protesting one way or the other, I think it's going to awaken a lot of people who now will see for the first time that the system truly is corrupt. And whether you're on the right or the political left, everyone has to deal with this incredibly corrupt system. And how do you fix it?
Yeah, left wing, right wing, they're wings of the same bird, and the bird's corrupt. It's corrupt, and it's really sad to see what's happened. But let's move into some more positive things. 2020 has been kind of a bad year in many ways. Most of us can agree. But in the middle of all that turmoil, we had stories that were seeded out through in many cases, the mainstream media, that are leading us closer and closer to some sort of disclosure. I think it's going to be a partial disclosure, which I've been hearing a lot about, that will lead up to technology coming out, basically showing us the planes, the hybrid planes that Space Force is going to become well known for flying. They're trying to lead us up to those types of revelations. And unfortunately, they speculate that technology may first be debuted in war, which, we're hoping not. But that's, kind of what we're leading up to. So they're trying to seed the consciousness of humanity with concepts of space travel, time travel, warping space-time, trying to expand their consciousness a little bit to get it ready for the larger disclosures that are coming out. And I know that when I mentioned doing a video with you about some of the disclosures from 2020, you came back within a few hours with a top 10 list. And I think it's a really good list.
Yes, I have a top 10 list of exopolitics stories for 2020 that all have major disclosure components. So maybe we can just go through those in reverse order. So number 10 on my list was China sent up its Chang'e 5 mission that landed on the moon and successfully gathered some moon samples and returned back to Earth, back to China. And so those samples are now being studied in Chinese laboratories. So this was the first mission that had brought back lunar samples, according to the open source literature, since 1976, which is when the Russians were up there last. And of course, the Apollo missions in 1972. So this really does show that there is this return to the moon for the kind of public space programs that is happening, and that China is going to be a leading player in that. And whether that's a good or bad thing, people are all over the map on that. So what do you think about that?
Oh, I think it's interesting that I know one of the big reasons a lot of these countries want to get to the moon is for strategic reasons. The helium-3 possibilities, for energy, but also there's this big secret about this micronova that occurs, every so many years, and I believe even some articles came out about orange and green glass or glass beads being found in like the regolith on the moon. That is actually ejecta from the sun from one of these solar events. So if they're able to gather that, then China is going to be able to put together a lot of information that they don't have yet about this cycle of micronovas that our solar system has.
Is there something particular about the South Pole region of the moon? Because I know the Chinese and the Americans seem to be focusing on that South Pole region. Anything about that that's noteworthy?
Well, there are some openings down there going to the inner part of the moon, but there's also this gigantic just piece of metal that's down going towards the South Pole, I believe, is where the location is. But there's this big chunk of metal that is helping. That's part of what's being used in the technology to magnetize the moon to keep it tidal locked with the Earth. It has to do with this big mass. So I don't know if they're inspecting that, if they're looking for some of these old entrances, not proper entrances. Well, they were proper entrances, but there are places to where they had these big doors that used to open and close on the moon. But after one of the last catastrophes, it's all crushed in on itself. But they can gain access through little crevices. So there's a lot of different agendas on the moon. So it could be a mixture of all of those.
Do you think the Chinese have made a deal with one of the extraterrestrial civilizations up there, or if we're talking about the Dark Fleet or the interplanetary corporate conglomerate, you think the Chinese have kind of cleared it with them that they can go there and establish a base there?
If they're establishing a base there, then yes, they had to have had it cleared.
Mm-hmm. Okay, great. Okay, so number 9 on my list was this that the US Congress has asked the intelligence community for a comprehensive UFO report 180 days after the passage of the 2021 National Defense Authorization Act. So that was passed by both houses of Congress, and Trump has vetoed it. So there's going to be some back and forth. But within that massive bill, there's the Intelligence Authorization Act for 2021, and that's where the intelligence community, and we're talking about the 17 different alphabet agencies that make up the intelligence community, that they all have to pool their information together to describe anything that they know about UFOs, or they call it unidentified aerial phenomenon, and that has to be submitted 180 days after in an unclassified form to Congress, and Congress can choose to release the unclassified version or hold on to it. There probably will be a classified portion as well, but that's very interesting that the Congress is asking the Director of National Intelligence to coordinate the intelligence community in releasing this comprehensive UFO report. So, what do you think of that? Is that going to be a possible major disclosure initiative?
Very possibly. I'm curious, do you have the dates of these two articles, approximate dates?
Well, the intelligence community, the Senate intelligence community that was headed by Marco Rubio, first put in place this requirement for Congress to put together this comprehensive report, and that was eventually passed by both houses, by the full House of Representatives and the Congress. The Senate. So now it's in there. It's part of this legislation for 2021, and it's just asking the intelligence community, or more specifically, it's asking the Director of National Intelligence, that's John Ratcliffe, to coordinate all of the intelligence community in providing a comprehensive UFO report that had to be submitted to Congress 180 days after the passage of the enabling legislation. So we're talking about sometime in June or July, there's going to be a report given to Congress by Ratcliffe or the DNI at that time, describing everything that the intel community knows about UFOs.
It's hard to predict how that would turn out, because these 17 agencies, most of them are still deep state controlled. So I think it's going to depend really on who finally prevails in this election, and who within the leadership of this election, of this intelligence community, is replaced between now and then. We've seen a lot of people replaced in the DoD and other places of significance. So right now, I'm not real optimistic about any type of report we would get. We were supposed to get an election report as well, interference report from these exact same agencies, and they have pushed back and resisted.
Mm-hmm. Well, I know that this particular UFO report kind of like came out of Tom DeLonge's To the Stars Academy lobbying Congress and Rubio and different members to pass some kind of legislation for a comprehensive report. So it kind of comes out of that kind of like disclosure approach. But I guess the potential here is that a lot more can be released than just the intelligence community telling us about these UFO sightings that Navy pilots observed in 2004, 2015, and even more recently, 2019, I believe.
Yeah, it could be part of a planned lead up to some of these larger, these more secretive technologies that I'm told will be released in the next couple of years as a part of Space Force.
Mm-hmm. Right. So number 8 on the list is something you told me, which was that President Trump received a secret briefing that the Roswell UFO involved time-traveling humans. So I guess the question there is this disclosure narrative something that we can expect more likely to emerge, that the UFOs that are being seen are not extraterrestrial, but they are time-traveling humans from the future?
Yes, and he has received different types of briefings, which include aliens and all of that. But one of the deep state briefings that he received was that we had been, for decades, dealing with ourselves from the future. We had made, after a few incidents to where technology popped back into the past, and we had recovered it, we had ended up coming into contact at some point with the people in the future, and all of the secrecy is supposedly to prevent the timeline from being spoiled as we get closer and closer to, let's say, 2036 or whatever it is, when basically we catch up to that timeline that was sending technology back. They were telling me that, I can't remember, I think it was in the UK, there was a base, a nuclear base that was visited by a craft. They were telling me that this was, they thought was one of our future craft that had come back and was visiting this base. So there's a lot of little anecdotal evidence that corroborates that story, because it is partially true. We are dealing with ourselves from the future, but there's this whole other extraterrestrial component, Galactic Federations, all of that's a part of it. And we're just sticking our feet in the pond of that larger environment.
So I just wonder, Corey, with that kind of revelation that we are more likely to head, or we're very likely to have this kind of official disclosure narrative about time-traveling humans from, say, 2036 coming back to visit us and reveal things that are happening, whether, what that means for individuals personally, because one of the things I got out of reading the Seth material, that was Jane Roberts' stuff, was this idea that our future selves and our past selves are all part of this kind of seamless identity that we are, that it's not a matter of like, you wait for what's to happen, and what's happened has happened and can't be changed, that all of these things can be changed, that you can actually communicate or connect with your past selves, your prior lives, or your future self. So can we connect with our future selves, where, who we are in 2036, And can we connect with that, our future self in that time, and say, hey, tell me what's going on there. What can I expect?
I think that there's an argument that you can gain information that way. We would do experiments when we were very young in the programs to where, let's say you put something in a precarious place on a table and it got knocked off at school and it broke something that, was important to you. And when that happened, you try to send yourself back in time a message of be careful, be careful, be careful. And but always being consciously aware that you may, and looking for any type of information from your future self. And there was some success, with those techniques. But I think mainly what's been going on is that there's been like this Space Force type group. 2036 was just a number I picked randomly, from somewhere in our future, starting in the 1930s, 40s, 50s, we started becoming more and more contact with them. We knew that something was going on. We had recovered technology. We knew that it was basically all elements from this planet, and it looked, there were numbers on it on the boards that looked just like something we would make. So they knew that some of this stuff was coming from the future. And when they began to receive this stuff from the future and reverse engineer it, it starts closing that gap technologically quicker than the timeline had originally allowed. So the people in the future began to contact the people in the past and give them guidance and make this the supposed biggest secret of humanity. And meanwhile, they just are trying to mitigate any problems as the gap slowly, the 1950s, the 70s, 90s, 2020, the closer we get, the more information we are allowed and the more preparation we're given. That's the narrative, and it's true to a certain degree.
Mm-hmm. So in terms of this whole ascension process, I know you talk a lot about that in past classes, and I know your upcoming class, you're going to be talking about that as well. So would this be a part of the ascension process where we individually kind of like try and develop this kind of multi-dimensional awareness or multi-temporal awareness that we are both here in the here and now, but also a part of us is in the future and in the past, and the more we connect with those different aspects of ourselves, the better ready we're going to be for this ascension.
Yeah, the more we open ourselves up to these types of concepts, the better, because as these energies are increasingly released from the sun, it's being fed by the cosmic web going into the middle of the sun, and these energies are pulsing out. As those increase, the people in the community that you see that are losing it, the people on the street when you're driving down the road, the people in churches, synagogues that are just not acting right, those people are just going to get worse. And these energies are forcing us to either deal with our own insecurities and traumas and karma, or go mad in the process. And a lot of people, like I think we discussed before, a lot of people just don't have the ability to do that right now. They're too triggered. They can't get out of their triggered state. They're just locked in, and they have other people that are triggered in the same way. So it's like this, it's crazy. So, and I'm told that it's going to get even worse. So the more inner work that we can do, the more dealing with our traumas and insecurities, the more aware we are of our distortions, the better off we're going to be as these energies increase, and the more cogent we're going to be while others are losing their minds around us. And hopefully everyone else will fare well, but so far it looks like we're building up to a larger percentage of people going mad than even I expected.
Mm-hmm. Well, moving up the list now, we're at number 7, and number 7 is Space Force completes its first year with an official logo, its recruits, space bases, doctrinal documents, and a name for Space Force professionals. They're calling themselves Guardians now. So what do you think of that? And especially the name that Space Force is now officially 1 year old, and it's calling all its members Guardians. What do you think?
I think it's very interesting. I mean, I think, have you heard of the Guardian popping up anywhere else in ufology from like many years ago? I don't know. Sometimes I don't know from what I heard in the programs and what I heard from, when I was out and researching. But yeah, it seems that the Guardian program was kind of known about for a while. I don't know if it was a different program or if it was just foreknowledge of the program that would be established in the future.
Well, I know that Air Force Space Command that was set up in 1982. In 1983, they developed this motto. The motto was Guardians of the High Frontier. So that's where Space Force says that the name Guardians comes from this tradition. But of course, people associate Guardian with the pop culture references like Guardians of the Galaxy, and there's also on Star Trek Discovery, the recent reboot, there's this Guardian of the Guardian of the Universe, I think it was, something like that. Just appeared. This old guy just appears. So yeah, just interesting references in the pop culture. So I don't know in the secret space program literature, other than that, the reference to Guardians. Those are the only examples I know of.
Okay.
So number 6 is a space center is to be established at Ramstein Air Base, Germany, by NATO. And I thought that was really a big news story because we are having the creation of a multinational space alliance. And that seems to be building up to a kind of space NATO.
Well, yeah, and not only that, but that would indicate that other NATO nations have space abilities in space.
Exactly.
So that's another revelation that could come about. More of the military-industrial complex level of technology, but on a global scale.
Sorry, I didn't want to cut in. So an interesting question I have here is, you've talked about the Dark Fleet and the connection to this breakaway German group in Antarctica. What connection do you think exists between that group and what's happening in Germany right now? I thought, the choice of Ramstein Air Base in Germany, the biggest US facility in Europe, there at Ramstein, and the Germans spend very little of their budget of their military. They have a very small military budget, less than 2% of their GDP goes to a budget. So I wonder if that's by design, so that the German government can funnel more money secretly to a secret space program that the Germans run. And do the Germans, like we're talking about the German Federal Republic, does that have a secret space program? And is that connected with the Dark Fleet?
I'm sure there's some sort of connection with the Dark Fleet being where it's located and who's involved. I don't have a whole lot of information on it. I do think that most of these things, when they're built that we hear about, they're built for the military-industrial complex level of these programs. Dark Fleet has much more advanced technology than the technologies that we're going to be made aware of from Space Force and related programs from NATO.
So this seems to also be a very important step in this developing this kind of multinational Space Force alliance. that is designed to counter China, because I think the US policymakers are very concerned about China. China's economy, depending on whether you measure it as, nominal GDP or whether you measure it in terms of purchasing power parity, it's either already bigger than the US or going to be bigger than the US. But in the future, China's economy is going to be twice the size of America's economy, and the Chinese are pouring a lot of their budget into military modernization. Their navy is already bigger than the US Navy. So by the mid 2030s, China is going to have the biggest military on the planet. So the only way the US can deal with that is to form this kind of alliance with Europeans and Canadians, Australians, and so forth to counter what China's going to become.
Yeah, and unfortunately, due to treachery within our own country and a lot of very clever spycraft, they now have all of the military-industrial level technology that we and our allies had. It's horrible, but now they're able to get all of that without having to do the research, just for free, and then so they save all of the money and develops research and development, and they just pour all of that money into just building out the technology. And there's some they have some formidable space warfare technology.
So number 5 on the list is Salvador Payas' patent application on nuclear fusion gets published in a prestigious journal. So Salvador Payas, he's the Navy scientist that has over the last 5 years released a succession of patent applications. And we just learned very recently from the Drive online magazine that Payas actually got official approval from behind the scenes from different Navy committees to go forward with releasing these patent applications and for publishing these in prestigious journals. So it does look like what he's doing is part of a Navy-sanctioned disclosure process.
And I think that same article mentioned that they built prototypes as well. Did they not?
That's right. Yeah, they were some experimental models of these craft. That the main craft is called the Hybrid Aerospace Underwater Craft, and is capable of traveling underwater at 500 miles an hour, and also reaching escape velocity 24,000 miles per hour, and that this has anti-gravity propulsion systems and electromagnetic shields and so forth. So this is something that can operate both underwater, in the atmosphere, and travel out into outer space.
It's amazing. It's amazing that this technology is actually being acknowledged, at least the principles of it.
Yeah, I do wonder whether this is kind of part of this building narrative that these craft that the Navy pilots are seeing and that the mainstream media is kind of like going, is covering extensively, the 2004, 2015, 2019 sightings of naval aircraft carrier battle groups, where these UFOs were photographed and seen, that some of them refer to these triangular craft. And I think the most recent sighting was in 2019, and that talked about a triangle-shaped craft that popped out of the water, that it could travel very quickly under the water, popped out of the water, and then traveled up into the upper atmosphere. So, when you look at that and you look at these patent applications by Salvador Payas, it's like, well, isn't this the craft that these pilots are describing, that this Navy scientist is talking about it? So are they laying the foundation that this is all future technology that we are witnessing now?
Yeah, I mean, there are a lot of amazing things going on right now. I chat with David Wilcock just about every day. He's been telling me about the progress. People have been wondering what he's been up to. He's working on these hover cars with very interesting technologies that are related to the programs. So and not only on top of what he's doing, I hear of at least 5 other projects out there that are struggling, but have the technology, have the engineers that used to be in programs that are a part of them, that are waiting for money, to be able to actually do these things. And I've actually been talking to some people. It sounds like there could be an influx of money. We'll talk off air about that. Interesting ways money could be coming in to help humanity with these types of projects. But this type of information is being given to us about these patents now, because this technology is about to start showing up in space planes and taxis and all these different types of technologies. They're gonna start showing up.
Mm-hmm. Well, that takes us to number 4 on the list, and that is this former Air Force intelligence specialist Mike Turber came forward and talked about the Navy Tic Tac sightings being part of a US Air Force secret space program. He says that back in 2005, a buddy of his contacted him who was still working for the Air Force and told him about a briefing that he was preparing slides for, and that the briefing concerned these Navy pilot sightings of some UFOs. And as the information emerged that these UFOs were actually part of an Air Force secret space program, or that these were craft that had actually been built at Plant 42 in Palmdale, California, by Lockheed Martin's Skunk Works. So I thought, that was a very big development, because it gives us an idea, not only that this program exists, but also where the craft are being built today, that these are operational and are being built and deployed out of places like Palmdale's Plant 42, which is adjacent to Edwards Air Force Base.
Well, I was unaware of that report. That is amazing. I think maybe we need to get some people to dig into that a little bit more and cover it more in the future. And I can ask around a little bit about those facilities and see what I can find out. But that's very cool. If we're able to tie the Tic Tac craft from that Navy report of a UFO to one of these black programs, one of these secret space programs, then that goes a long way to bolstering what you and I have been talking about over the years.
Well, there have been a couple of Navy servicemen who came forward to talk about the 2004 Navy sightings on the, and they said that on the USS Nimitz, one of the servicemen said that 2 Air Force officials came on board, and they were accompanied by the commander of this Air Force, of this Navy radar tracking specialist, whose job it was to kind of like get the flight recordings of the Navy pilots and kind of like pull them together or have them on this, well, he called it a brick. And that had all of the electronic communications and all of the record of what the Navy pilots had seen concerning the UFO. And he said that he put that where it was supposed to be stored. And then he was approached by his commander, his commanding officer, and 2 guys in Air Force uniforms, kind of like flight suits, Air Force flight suits, and asked for the bricks. And he said, well, I need to record this. And his commander said, no, don't do that. Don't bother with any of that. Just hand them over to the 2 gentlemen. And so he did. And that was the last he saw of those bricks. So that shows. And the same thing happened on another one of the Navy craft that was the USS Princeton in 2004. So that shows that the Air Force was involved in those UFO incidents back then. So yeah, that's exactly what Turbo was saying, that this was what was going on.
That's amazing. I'm glad you brought that one to my attention.
Yeah. Okay, so the next thing on the list is the Eric Davis briefings to the Pentagon and to Congress on alien reverse engineering efforts by a corporation. And this made number 3 on my top 10 list because it was covered by the major newspapers, Politico, the New York Times, and a bunch of other mainstream news sites that were kind of like really intrigued by this report that this scientist, Dr. Eric Davis, knew about unsuccessful reverse engineering efforts. And I thought it was noteworthy just because the major media is like really wanting to push forward this narrative that there have been these efforts by corporations to study retrieved flying saucer craft that are extraterrestrial in origin, but that the whole reverse engineering effort was unsuccessful. Nothing emerged out of it. And that kind of matched what Bob Lazar said back in 1989. So I thought that was a very interesting story. So yeah, do you think this is part of a kind of new narrative to make out that, yeah, you know, we did recover crashed extraterrestrial craft, but we haven't been able to reverse engineer and they're too advanced for us?
Yeah, that's definitely a narrative. We humans are very clever engineers, and we didn't have to reverse engineer it on our own. We were making contact with different ETs, making deals with them, and they were teaching us and showing us how this is done. So yeah, we were able to bridge that gap.
So, you know, this raises a very interesting question, which is, you know, what do we make of the Bob Lazar story? Because, you know, Bob Lazar, as well as this, the information concerning the unsuccessful efforts to reverse engineer a captured extraterrestrial craft, Bob Lazar was saying pretty much the same thing back in 1989, that he was working on this top secret program down there at S4 at Area 51. There were 9 craft. It was poorly funded. There were only a few scientists, so they were really hampered by the lack of scientific collaboration. And so there was very little progress that had happened. And presumably after he left, you know, there was very little progress. So do you think, even going back as far as Bob Lazar in 1989, that the stage was set for a narrative that that they might roll out, that, yeah, this stuff has been retrieved, but no, we haven't made any progress?
Well, that's probably the narrative they were given for operational security, you know, because the next question would be, well, what have you built? Show me, I want to see, what have you built? I bet it's really cool. Well, they don't want to say, oh, well, we have a whole infrastructure in space now, but you're not allowed to know about it. Oh, well, you already know too much now. You know, I mean, they have to manage people's perceptions to have a certain understanding, a controlled understanding of what's going on in the programs. And they all have different understandings depending on what the powers that be think they need to be manipulated to believe. And they manipulate everything about their environment to cause them to believe what they want them to believe for operational security reasons. That's how they keep all of these big secrets. People are like, you can't keep a secret like this. It's like an onion, layers of deception and partial pieces of the overall picture. And no one really has it all, but a lot of them will have enough to where they're very confident and become a little too overconfident, and hubris sets in. And then they miss out on a lot of other information coming in because they think that they know all the details.
One of the questions I have for you here is, well, what do you think of the idea that Area 51 and S4 are really just kind of like like just show and tell for visiting congressmen or VIPs to kind of like show them some advanced stuff, whether it's advanced spy planes, the Aurora project, or some of these kind of like retrieved UFOs that are really held there for storage purposes, that they're not really trying to reverse engineer these, that they've already done it.
Yeah, I was told that these places are more of museums and dog and pony shows now.
Perfect. Okay, that's exactly what I wanted to know. And that places like Plant 42 over there in Palmdale, California, where Lockheed Skunk Works is where the real stuff is being built.
Yeah, there's in Utah, Idaho, there are all of these different places underground where they're building out various technologies in full or in components where they're brought together to another location and built into the final large project.
Mm-hmm. Great. Okay. Well, now we get to the number 2 story, which was the signing of the Artemis Accords, and this was something that was had 7 countries sign along with the US to cooperate on the Artemis missions, which is the returning humans to the moon and then to move on to Mars and to establish a kind of permanent presence in the moon orbit that could be used for refueling purposes or for missions to Mars. And this seemed to me to be a really big story because we're moving into this creation of a multinational space alliance, and that this is going to be how space is to be regulated by the kind of Western democracies. And within the Artemis Accords, there are provisions there for establishing things like safety zones where you could actually militarily intervene to protect miners, corporations, or national space programs that are part of this of the Artemis Accords from foreign adversaries. And the subtext here is China is the most likely foreign adversary that would be locked out.
All these security zones, all these flight corridors that are just newly announced in these Artemis Accords have been utilized for decades.
Mm-hmm.
So this might be just a formal acknowledgement of something that's been going on for a long time, and then a part of the ruse is that this is new, but a lot of I would say probably a lot of what's in those Artemis Accords are maybe just the final ratification, public ratification of how things have been operating for some time.
Okay, that takes me to the next question, which is, what do you think is going to happen with the Lunar Operations Command? Is that going to be something that's just simply handed over to this kind of to the Artemis Accords or to the nations that are part of the Artemis Accords, or will the Artemis Accords, how will that filter in to the existing power structure on the moon, like Lunar Operations Command, monitoring and regulating space traffic in the kind of whole moon Earth region?
Yeah, I was told that infrastructure at some point would be handed over to a multinational conglomerate that represents the nations equitably. Is it this Artemis Accords group? I don't know. I've heard about this for some time, that it would the infrastructure would be handed over to a multinational group that would make sure that it was used equitably for all nations of the planet. So I don't know if this Artemis Accords group fits that bill or not.
Well, there seems to be kind of 2 major models for how space is going to be regulated. One is the approach that the US currently has of setting up the Artemis Accords, making it a kind of multinational space alliance to regulate the moon, the Earth region, Mars, eventually even to maybe make deals with outer space powers. And the other approach is and I should mention that the Artemis Accords is very much a kind of free enterprise capitalist approach where companies can own or can at least control areas where they establish resources and they can use the profits for their own kind of like corporate shareholders and so forth. They don't have to share that with anyone. The other approach, which was established in back in 1967 with the Outer Space Treaty, is more a kind of like space is the common heritage of all humanity, and anyone out there in space doing space mining or creating profits or extracting resources or whatever it is out there, that all of that has to be done for the common heritage of humanity, and there needs to be some kind of international regulatory body to oversee that. So I think China's behind that.
Yeah, it's very difficult to say because the corporations end up having more money than the governments to spend on infrastructure and all of these things once they get their hands on the technology. The interplanetary corporate conglomerate that's out there, well, almost all of the bases that the military use, these big cities on Mars and other places, they were built and they're basically owned by these corporate conglomerates. And that's been one of the biggest problems with trying to get this technology released to humanity, and some of the ethics issues that have occurred with the space programs. Because I'm sorry, a lot of times the people that rise to the top of wanting to have power in a company, a lot of these people are sociopaths. They think differently. And these people are getting control. They're getting control of resources, and they end up forming committees and groups and working together to hide stuff from the military, hide stuff from humanity. It does need to be regulated. It does need to be regulated, and there needs to be oversight.
Well, this brings to mind this series, I think it's on Amazon Prime, The Expanse, that's based on the series of books by James Corey, which is a pseudonym, a couple of authors.
And strangely, my name's James Corey Goode.
Yeah.
When the Expanse came out, all of these conspiracy theories just exploded because James Corey. Oh my God! Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. I thought that was quite a synchronicity that that the first two names in your full name are what they chose as this kind of pseudonym to write this best-selling series of books under. And of course, it's become a series, a popular series on Amazon Prime, but it talks about this future where power is you have the Earth governments and the United Nations and the kind of governmental alliances kind of dealing with corporations that have established a presence in space. They have their own agendas out there, and they have bases all over the solar system. Mars is an autonomous or independent nation, and you have these mining colonies on Ceres and other planets, the moons of Jupiter and Saturn and so forth. So, I mean, is that really where we're heading? Do you think The Expanse is a kind of fair approximation as to the way things stand at the moment, or at the very least where we're heading?
I'd like to say it's where we're headed. That way we could avert it, but it's where we've been for decades. The corporate conglomerate that controls it all. It's even more pervasive than in that book series and television series. I mean, it's crazy. I mean, we're hoping, soon to do some sort of movie or television series that's going to show the real story of what has gone on, and get that to tens of millions of people. But The Expanse and other shows have already seeded the consciousness for a lot of the information about our cosmic infrastructure that we already have, that we're going to be made aware of at some point. And I think, some of these movies are disclosures, snuck in, and a lot of times I think that the people that have written some of these movies are seers. They're futurists. They see what's coming, and they're able to just understand on some level that this is happening, and then it translates through their creative process, as a part of the mass consciousness, being connected. So, this information, the mass consciousness wants to learn these things. It's always sending little proxies out to pick and dig and find little pieces of information to bring to the collective. And I think that, through entertainment and, the books that we read, a lot of this information has been seeded to the mass consciousness by the mass consciousness.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. That it's that you can keep the secrets from humanity through the official system as has been done, but you can't suppress the mass consciousness or the collective consciousness from just having that information percolate up through the imaginations of people, like this like the authors of the Expanse, that they presumably created this out of their own kind of creative genius, that they were inspired in some way. But there are so many parallels with what you've been disclosing from the secret space programs that it kind of gives us an insight into how the collective consciousness operates, to both have genuine disclosures by insiders like yourself, and also to have a similar disclosure process, but through the creative outlet or the genius of authors like James Corey.
Yeah, our species is a very psychic species that has been repressed for eons. We have the ability, once we make a connection with a lot of these beings that are our cosmic cousins, and we have lost these control grids and mind control methods that we're under right now, we're going to blossom very quickly. You can't be effectively psychic when you're traumatized. You can't. In the programs, they went out of their way when it was time for IEs to do work to make sure they had no trauma, no stress, as best as they could, because it affects it. And the reptilians and AI groups and all of these beings that have suppressed us, they're suppressing our abilities, because they know we have the co-creative consciousness and the abilities to completely change our reality and take away their power. So that's one of the biggest disclosures that's going to occur for us in the future, is the disclosure of our true abilities after we get rid of all of this trauma.
Mm-hmm. Okay, that takes me to the top story, I thought, for Exopolitics in 2020 is the revelations from Professor Haim Eshed concerning US extraterrestrial agreements, a joint base on Mars, and the Galactic Federation. Now, I know we talked about that at length during the last interview, but maybe there's some updates that you might have to that.
No, I don't have any updates, but I do think that it is pretty significant that a person of that caliber would come out and talk about federations, the Galactic Federations. It's something that has popped up for a while. There have been bases on Earth that the CIA has remote viewed, and they've come up with readings that it's part of a Galactic Federation. There are reports that there's some sort of base under Lake Titicaca. There have been a lot of reports over the years about this federation, and I do think that we covered it pretty thoroughly in our last video. And if you didn't, in the audience, didn't see that last video, I would go back and watch it. It had some really good information.
Yeah, I definitely recommend the video, and we also have a transcript that we're going to make available as well. I'll certainly release that. All that should be available by the time people are viewing this. I also, the one update that I had on that was that I found that there are a lot of people, especially UFO researchers, who curiously are always the biggest debunkers of kind of big developments like this. They have their preferred narrative, but if you go beyond that narrative, like Professor Eshed did by revealing these agreements and Galactic Federation and joint bases on Mars, UFO researchers are among the first to try and debunk that. So they're just trying to make out that, well, he's like having a senior moment, or that the translation was lost, and and that's nonsense, because I actually wrote up an article where I went into depth into the interview, because there actually is a transcript. You can actually check for yourself through Google that the professor did say these things, that there wasn't any mistranslation, and that also, according to his peers, one of the current head of Israel's space development agency, as I recall it, his name, Dr. Isaac Ben Israel, and he says that Professor Eshed has been talking about extraterrestrials for decades. So this wasn't just a senior moment. This guy's been talking to his colleagues professionally about extraterrestrials for decades. It's just, the thing was that I guess his colleagues didn't believe him, but now he's revealing it, and I think he's doing it in a way that is suitable for someone of his pedigree. You don't come out and say, well, you know, I was in this classified program and this is what we did, because that's violating your security oath. But you do it in a way where you refer to, you know, popular culture or what's out there. Say, well, you know, people like Laura Eisenhower, the great-granddaughter of President Eisenhower, was talking about these agreements and so forth. And you refer to that, you know, to kind of say, yeah, this is real, it exists, but you're not actually saying this is what this is what your classified program told you. It's like, oh, well, you know, you just read it out there, but you're kind of like using open source literature to tell secrets that you cannot reveal through your classified sources.
Yeah, I mean, the way ufology reacts to information is pretty interesting sometimes, but I'm going to let you in on a little secret, okay? Ufology is a bit compromised. You know, disclosure itself, the whole disclosure movement was set up by the Rockefellers and other groups to control the narrative. So ufology, you know, it's been a mire for a long time, and a lot of people are starting to reveal who and what they are, and the steady researchers looking for the truth are starting to be seen for what they are. Yeah, I mean, you know, ufology, you know, is a little bit of a mess, and it's that way on purpose, because, you know, the powers that be don't want information flowing out quicker than their timetable.
Yeah, that always really puzzled me about the ufology movement back in 2001 when I got involved in this field, was that how you have this group of people that are so fixated in the UFO phenomenon, but yet when you start talking about the occupants of the UFOs, they just shut you down. They don't want to hear about it. They're saying, you know, we're scientists. We look at the kind of like the UFO phenomenon. You know, we're not going to speculate about who's in it and why they're here and how they're contacting people. To me, that was absurd. But I have certainly experienced my fair share of, you know, very heated attacks, debunking, discrediting, kind of character assassination from people that I would have thought would have been my allies, but they were the UFO researchers. So, but now, thankfully, we've reached the point where, you know, we have so many insiders, credible insiders like yourself, Bill Tompkins, and others coming forward to share what's really going on inside. And of course, when someone like Hamy Eshed comes along and corroborates what you and Bill Tompkins and others have been saying, the UFO researchers jump up and down and start screaming. So, well, you know, he's having a senior moment or mistranslation. It's like, no, he means what he says exactly, and it corroborates what Corey and others have been saying for years now.
It's amazing. The even with scientists, people in this community, what the opinions and beliefs they've formed around these topics, they defend like it's their religion being violated. You know, it is deeply, deeply held beliefs, and you know, and it's really weird to watch humans, you know, tripping over themselves because of, these types of behaviors. But I mean, it's just, the human condition.
So those are my top 10 stories for 2020. And as for 2021, what's to come? I'm still optimistic, of course, like everyone. We're waiting to see how things are going to play out up until January 20. But I'm still optimistic that there'll be a positive outcome, and that with that positive outcome in January 20, with this second administration, if you like, that I am optimistic that we are going to have some very positive things happening down the track.
Well, speaking of 2021, do you have anything going on in 2021 that you want to talk about?
Sure, yeah. In January 3rd, I'm going to be doing a webinar on Portal to Ascension, and that's going to be on this topic. I'll go into depth into some of the things that been discussing today. So also I'm going to be doing a webinar towards the end of January. That's going to be on exopolitics and the Second American Revolution, which I think is going to be very important, because I think we are witnessing a Second American Revolution right now. So that'll be later in January, and people can just go to my website, exopolitics.org, to get the updates on all of that.
That's awesome. Yeah, that's great. And just to let people know, next year, on the 9th of January, I begin my Blue Avians and the Law of One course. A lot of people are very excited about that. You can go to ascensionworks.tv to look into that, to get more information. Our graphic novel is back on pre-sale at disclosurecomics.com. The art is turning out amazing. We're hopefully starting on the second graphic novel script here real soon. All of this is being used as a concept to bring to Hollywood to tell this magnificent story, but also to affect the mass consciousness on a large scale and try to create a metaphysical matrix that sucks people in, awakens them, and brings them to this community, so they come and see each and every one of your information out there and hear your stories, and then add to the growth process. So we're very excited about the possibilities there. And we're building out ascensionworks.tv. All of my other projects, we're just really heavily reinvesting our time and efforts into building out Ascension Works TV into a place that will be censorship free, to where people can come, share videos, share posts, create accounts, all for free, while also having, a streaming side to where we get revenue, to where we have a lot of people who are interested in doing TV shows for us. So we're excited about all of those possibilities, depending on how smooth 2021 is. Hopefully much smoother. But yeah, it sounds like, we all have some really, exciting things that, we're going to start 2021 with. Is there anything else that you wanted to share with the audience?
Well, I'm working on a new book that's going to be on Space Force. The title is Space Force and Rise of Starfleet. So I'm going to go into detail into the history of Space Force, how much opposition there was to the creation of a Space Force, and how its creation really does open the doors to this Star Trek future that I know you've talked about in the past, that the Pentagon or the military people that are part of these secret space programs want. That in fact this Star Trek future is going to be manifested through Space Force. So that's something I am looking forward to finishing. The manuscript's already been written. Now it's going through the editing process, but it should come out around April of 2021.
Awesome. Well, I look forward to talking with you, possibly on video, more about that book when it comes out.
Fantastic. Well, I really enjoyed this discussion.
Me too, Dr. Sala. And like I said, I really appreciate your years of work, our several years of friendship, and I look forward to what next year brings.
Me too. Aloha.
Aloha. Well, thank you for joining us here on the Sphere Being Alliance channel. If you would like to see more content like this, which there's a lot more coming out here soon, please go down right now and click on subscribe. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for watching the Sphere Being Alliance channel. Make sure you click on subscribe and smash the bell to make sure you're receiving all the new content from the Sphere Being Alliance YouTube channel.